The survivors, weary and beaten down by the endless war, stepped cautiously onto the Leviathan. The vastness of the ship was overwhelming, its corridors dark, its hull scarred by years of disuse. The faint hum of its dormant engines was the only sound that filled the air. It was a relic, an ancient warship built to fight a war long forgotten. Now, it was humanity's last hope. Captain Ashford's boots echoed as he walked ahead of the group, his hand resting lightly on the wall, feeling the faint vibrations of the ship's decaying infrastructure. The ship had been abandoned after the last of humanity's forces were wiped out, its purpose seemingly fulfilled. Or so everyone had thought. Ashford had heard the rumors. The Leviathan was more than just a ship. It was a weapon designed to turn the tide of any conflict, no matter how hopeless. But like everything else from humanity's golden age, it had been lost, forgotten by the galaxy's new rulers. "Stay close," Ashford called over his shoulder, his voice low but commanding. His crew, a mix of veterans and civilians who had fought to survive, shuffled behind him. The look in their eyes told him everything he needed to know. They were tired, terrified, but determined. Each of them had lost something: family, home, hope. And now, they were here, on this derelict ship, grasping at the slimmest possibility of salvation. "How do we even know this thing will work?" Private Juno asked, her voice filled with doubt. She was young, barely out of her teens, but she had seen the horrors of war like all of them. The idea that a single ship could defeat the invaders felt like a long shot. Too many times they had clung to hope, only to watch it wither. "Because we have no other choice," Ashford answered, his gaze hardening. "The Leviathan is humanity's last weapon. If it still works, it's our only chance." He pressed forward, reaching a large central chamber. It was here, in the heart of the ship, where the Leviathan's true power lay dormant. The control room was a massive domed space filled with advanced technology. Screens flickered with static, and console lights pulsed weakly, as if the ship itself was waking from a long slumber. The walls were lined with intricate metal panels, their surfaces marked by the passage of time. Ashford approached a large terminal in the center of the room. It was covered in dust and grime, but he could still make out the insignia of the old human fleet. He hesitated for a moment, then pressed a series of buttons. The terminal sparked to life. A cold, mechanical voice filled the room. "Welcome, Captain Ashford. I am Prometheus, the AI system of the Leviathan. How may I assist you?" The crew gasped in unison, the weight of the moment hitting them all at once. They had been fighting to survive, clinging to the hope that something, anything, might still stand in their favor. And now, standing before them, was the very thing that could change the course of their war. Ashford's voice was steady, though a trace of awe lingered. "Prometheus, bring the Leviathan online. We're going to need everything you've got." The AI's response was immediate. "Affirmative, Captain. Reinitializing core systems now." As the lights in the control room flickered to life, a sense of power surged through the ship. The survivors could feel it. The Leviathan was waking. And with it, their last hope. The hum of the Leviathan's systems slowly grew louder as Prometheus worked to bring the ship's dormant engines and weapons online. Captain Ashford stood at the helm, watching the control panels light up, each one flickering with life like a long-forgotten heartbeat. The crew stood in awe, their eyes wide with the realization that the Leviathan was not just a warship. It was a living force, waiting to be unleashed. "Power levels at 23%, Prometheus announced, its voice calm and mechanical. "Primary weapons online in 15 minutes. Ashford turned to his crew, determination burning in his eyes. "We don't have 15 minutes. Get ready, everyone. The aliens will be here before we're fully operational. We'll have to fight with what we have." Juno, standing nearby, checked her pulse rifle, her hands trembling slightly. What if it's not enough? What if we're just trading one death sentence for another? Ashford's gaze never wavered. "It's enough because it's all we've got. We don't win this fight. Humanity's finished. But if we can hold them off until we're operational. A voice cut in, interrupting him. Captain. It was Lieutenant Cruz, the ship's weapons officer. I'm picking up a fleet. Multiple enemy signatures, fast movers, heading straight for us. The tension in the room spiked. Ashford quickly checked the ship's sensors, his heart sinking as the alien fleet appeared on the screens. The invaders had likely sensed the activation of the Leviathan. They knew it was humanity's last card to play, and they would come to crush it before it could be used. Damn it! Ashford muttered under his breath. Prometheus, how long until we have full power? 5 minutes, came the AI's neutral reply. 5 minutes, Ashford repeated, his voice tight. We have to hold them off until then. Cruz, prepare the cannons for a partial charge. Juno, get those defensive shields up. Now. The crew snapped into action, preparing the ship for battle. The Leviathan, despite its age and the damage it had sustained over the years, was a force unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. Its weapon systems, though currently underpowered, still far surpassed anything the invaders had at their disposal. But those weapons would need time to fully charge, time they didn't have. Enemy ships are within range, Cruz warned, her voice tinged with urgency. They're coming in fast. Brace for impact. The first volley of enemy fire hit the Leviathan with brutal force, the ship's hull groaning as the shields flared to life, absorbing the blasts. Ashford gritted his teeth as the ship rocked under the impact. Shields holding at 63%. Recharging. Prometheus reported, its calm tone doing little to soothe the growing sense of panic in the crew. Take evasive maneuvers. Ashford shouted. Move us, now. The Leviathan lurched to one side, its massive engines roaring to life as the ship's inertial dampeners kicked in. The alien ships, sleek and agile, followed in pursuit, their laser cannons opening fire again. The Leviathan dodged and weaved, barely staying ahead of the onslaught. But Ashford knew they couldn't keep this up for long. Captain, we're outgunned, Cruz said, frustration evident in her voice. These ships are faster, more agile. We won't survive a prolonged engagement. Ashford's mind raced. 5 minutes. He needed 5 minutes. And then, Prometheus would unleash the full power of the Leviathan. Hold on. Ashford growled. Just a little longer. Prometheus, do we have enough power for one blast? Affirmative. Weapon systems fully charged in 90 seconds. The Leviathan jolted again as another wave of enemy fire struck its shields, but Ashford's voice was unwavering. Good. Prepare to fire. The next few moments felt like an eternity as Ashford gripped the console, sweat beading on his brow. The Leviathan shook violently as the alien fleet closed in. But in that brief window of time, as the countdown ticked away, hope surged through Ashford. This ship, the last of humanity's weapons, was about to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Firing in 5, 4, 3. The countdown reached 0, and in that instant, a sharp, blinding flash filled the control room of the Leviathan. The ship's core had reached full power, and Prometheus had unleashed its devastating weapon, the Hellfire cannon. Ashford's heart raced as the ship's massive, gravity-defying turrets on either side of the hull locked in place. The space around the Leviathan seemed to warp, bending under the immense energy that now surged through the ship's systems. There was no turning back. Prometheus, fire at will, Ashford commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding outside. Affirmative, came the AI's calm response. Then, in a split second, the Hellfire cannon discharged, a brilliant, white-hot beam of concentrated energy, cutting through space with the force of a supernova. The blast tore into the nearest alien ships, slicing them apart like paper. The soundless explosion rippled through the vacuum of space, obliterating everything in its path. 2 of the alien ships disintegrated instantly, their hulks reduced to nothing but dust and debris. The Leviathan shuddered with the recoil, the systems struggling to maintain stability after such a massive release of energy. But Ashford barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the chaos unfolding on the screens. "We've done it," Lieutenant Cruz shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're retreating. The aliens." But Ashford's victory was short-lived. A low, groaning rumble echoed from deep within the ship. The Leviathan groaned under the strain, the energy output from the weapon taxing the ship's already fragile systems. "Prometheus, status report." Ashford barked, worry creeping into his voice. The AI's voice remained calm. "Critical systems instability detected. Primary weapon systems require immediate cooling. Hull integrity at 43%. Continuing to maintain function." "Damn it," Ashford muttered. The Hellfire cannon had done its job, but at a cost. The Leviathan was now barely holding together, its systems at the edge of failure. The next few moments would determine whether the ship could survive long enough to make another shot, or if they would be left vulnerable to the alien counterattack. Cruz, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear, turned toward Ashford. "Captain, we've broken their fleet, but we're sitting ducks now. The ship's too damaged to defend itself. We can't take another hit." Ashford clenched his fists. He knew that without the Leviathan's firepower, they'd be powerless against the remaining alien forces. If they didn't act fast, they'd be destroyed. And with the Leviathan as humanity's final hope, failure wasn't an option. "Prometheus," Ashford said, his voice fierce, "we need a secondary offensive. We can't rely on the main cannon again. What else do we have?" The AI's voice was unwavering. "Scanners indicate a weak point in the enemy's formation. Launching secondary torpedoes. Direct hit will disable their command ship. Weapon system primed." Ashford's eyes flickered to the alien fleet's position on the screen. He could see it, the command ship nestled within the heart of the remaining invader ships. If they destroyed that, it could cripple the entire alien fleet. The Leviathan was on the brink, but it was their only chance to end this. "Do it," Ashford ordered. The torpedoes, glowing with an intense blue energy, launched from the Leviathan's underbelly, streaking through space like comets of destruction. The alien ships tried to react, but they were too late. The torpedoes slammed into the command ship with devastating force, their explosive energy tearing through its hull and rupturing its core. In a spectacular explosion, the alien flagship vanished, taking out several smaller ships in the blast. The remaining invaders faltered. Without leadership, the fleet was thrown into disarray. "We've crippled them," Cruz shouted, her voice filled with a rare note of triumph. For a moment, the control room fell into stunned silence. The crew couldn't believe it. Against all odds, they had done the impossible. The Leviathan had struck the killing blow. But as the wreckage of the alien flagship drifted into space, Ashford couldn't shake the feeling that the war was far from over. "Don't get comfortable," he warned. "This was just the first wave. We've bought ourselves time, but we need to keep moving. Prometheus, prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're not out of the woods yet." The Leviathan continued to drift through the void, but the crew's morale was lifted. For the first time since the invasion, they felt like they might actually have a chance at victory. The Leviathan drifted through space, the battle raging all around it. The crew, though battered and exhausted, stood at their posts, awaiting the next wave of alien reinforcements. The damage to the ship was significant, and a lingering silence in the control room only added to the tension. But amidst the uncertainty, there was something else, something that none of them had felt in what seemed like a lifetime. Hope. "Captain," Cruz said, her voice quieter than usual. "We've done it. They're retreating, but it's not over. We need to move fast. The alien forces will regroup and come at us with everything they have." Ashford nodded, his gaze fixed on the damaged displays in front of him. The Leviathan had delivered a decisive blow, but it was clear that their victory had come at a high cost. The ship was barely holding together, its systems still in critical condition. And yet, There was a spark, a glimmer of something that made Ashford believe in humanity's ability to survive. The question is, what now? Ashford muttered to himself, though the crew heard him clearly. He knew they couldn't stay here for long. The Leviathan was a symbol of defiance, but if they didn't act quickly, they'd lose the momentum they had gained. The alien invaders would return in full force, and the Leviathan, their last bastion of hope, could be reduced to scrap. We can't let them come back. Ashford continued, his tone hardening. Prometheus, begin preliminary scans of the surrounding systems. Are there any remaining human colonies nearby that we can reach? Scanning. The AI responded. There are scattered human settlements within a few parsecs. However, they are mostly defenseless and vulnerable to alien reprisals. I recommend proceeding with caution. The weight of those words hung heavily in the air. Even with the Leviathan's firepower, they were still outnumbered. If they could help these survivors, they would need to act fast, before the aliens launched their counteroffensive. Prepare a course for the closest colony, Ashford ordered. We'll regroup there, provide what assistance we can, and then we hit back at the invaders. I want all repairs done, and I want that cannon back online. We've shown them what we're capable of. Let's remind them why they should fear us. The crew responded with determination, each member shifting into action. The damage to the ship was extensive, but the team was resourceful. Engineers worked furiously to restore the Leviathan's power, while the gunnery officers meticulously recalibrated the weapon systems. They would need the full might of the Leviathan if they hoped to survive the coming storm. As the crew worked, Ashford couldn't help but glance out of the viewport. The stars twinkled in the distance, peaceful and serene, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just emerged from. But even in the quiet of space, Ashford knew the truth. This battle was far from over. The alien invaders had seen what humanity was capable of, and they wouldn't stop until they had wiped out every last trace of human resistance. But for the first time in a long while, Ashford felt a flicker of something powerful inside him. It wasn't just the Leviathan. It was humanity itself, the will to fight, to survive, and to rise above the ashes of defeat. Captain, Cruz called, pulling him from his thoughts. We've made contact with the colony. They're preparing to receive us. Good, Ashford replied, a small but determined smile tugging at his lips. We have a chance, then. Get us there. Let's show them that humanity doesn't die easily. As the Leviathan roared back to life, its engines firing up with a deafening hum, Ashford felt the first surge of confidence he'd had in years. The alien forces may have underestimated them before, but now, the fight was just beginning. The Leviathan's engines roared to life as it charted a course toward the nearest human colony. The crew worked with renewed energy, each task a reminder that their survival depended on every second they could buy. Ashford stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the displays, his mind a whirlwind of strategies and contingencies. The battle had only just begun, and the Leviathan was their only card to play. The alien fleet was still out there, regrouping, and they knew the moment they emerged from the shadows, they'd be in for another deadly confrontation. Captain, we're approaching the colony, Cruz reported, her voice filled with both caution and optimism. However, their defenses are minimal. We can't expect much resistance if the aliens decide to follow us. Ashford nodded grimly. Understood. We'll have to make it count. Prometheus, what's the status of the repairs? Systems are stabilizing. The AI responded. The main cannon is at 42% capacity. However, secondary weapon systems are fully operational. Shield integrity is at 78%. The Leviathan is in a state of acceptable combat readiness. Acceptable, Ashford muttered under his breath. The Leviathan wasn't in perfect shape, but it was the best they had. If they were going to make a stand, it had to be now. Cruz, prep the crew for landing operations. We'll need to help defend the colony once we arrive. Ashford ordered. Juno, make sure the civilians are ready for evacuation if things go south. A few minutes later, the Leviathan entered the colony's orbit, a small but vital settlement tucked into a remote sector of space. The colony was an agricultural hub, home to families and workers who had never anticipated war on their doorstep. Ashford could see the flurry of activity through the ship's sensors as the colony scrambled to respond to the approaching warship. "They know we're here," Cruz said, watching the sensors. "They're preparing for us." "Good. Let's keep them alive," Ashford said firmly. "Prometheus, connect with the colony's defense systems. Coordinate any fire support we can give them." "Affirmative," Prometheus replied. "Linking now. Colony defense grid is active. Small anti-fighter turrets are online. I will assist with targeting optimization." The Leviathan's massive presence cast a shadow over the small colony as it descended. From the viewport, Ashford could see the chaos unfolding below. People rushing to shelters, ships launching into space, and lights flickering as the defense grid came online. The aliens were close, he could feel it. They had to know the Leviathan was here, and they would not be deterred by a single human settlement. The alien fleet would come for them in waves, trying to break through the colony's fragile defenses. "Civilians are taking shelter," Juno reported from the lower decks, her voice tense but resolute. "They've started evacuating non-essential personnel to the underground bunkers. We've got a little time." Ashford turned to face the crew, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the ship's control panels. They were ready. They had no other choice. "This is our chance," he said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We'll fight for this colony, for the people here. If we hold them off long enough, we can buy the rest of humanity time to regroup. But we need to work together, every single one of us. We'll give everything we've got." The crew nodded, steeling themselves for the fight ahead. Outside, the first signs of the enemy were emerging. A scattering of alien vessels, their sleek forms cutting through space like dark predators. They had arrived. "Captain, the enemy fleet is incoming," Cruz warned. They'd just jumped out of stealth. At least 20 ships, all heavily armed. Ashford's heart tightened as he looked at the alien ships, swift, deadly, and efficient. The Leviathan had only moments to prepare. "Prepare for battle stations," Ashford commanded. "We're not backing down. Let's show them what humanity can do." The calm before the storm shattered as the first wave of alien ships descended upon the colony. Their sleek, dark forms glinted in the light of the nearby star as they moved in formation, their weapons already charging. Ashford could see it on the radar. The enemy was preparing for a devastating bombardment, their intent clear, wiping out this colony and anything in their path. "Crews, we need to hold them off long enough for the civilians to evacuate," Ashford shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. The crew had moved into position quickly, but now it was time to see if the Leviathan could withstand the assault. "Ready the secondary weapons," Cruz ordered, her fingers flying over the controls. "We'll need everything we've got." The Leviathan's turrets whirred to life, small bursts of energy lancing out to strike at the first of the alien ships. They were fast, agile, and much more numerous than they had anticipated. Ashford gritted his teeth as he watched them retaliate with laser fire, the enemy's advanced weapons carving through the void with deadly precision. "Shields holding at 60%, Prometheus reported, its tone still eerily calm. "Hull integrity at 35%. We are taking significant damage." The Leviathan shook violently as more alien blasts hit its shields, the force of the impacts rattling the crew inside. They had to hold their ground. The colony's fragile defenses were barely enough to slow the alien ships, and without the Leviathan's firepower, there was no way they could survive. "Captain," Juno's voice rang through the comms. "The civilians are in the underground bunkers. We've got about 15 minutes before the enemy's ground forces breach the perimeter. We're going to need backup." "Understood," Ashford responded, his mind racing. "Keep the civilians safe. Juno, Cruz, target their command ship. If we can take that out, we can break their coordination." Cruz's fingers flew over the controls, locking onto the flagship in the enemy fleet. Targeting the command ship now. We have a lock. Preparing a full salvo of torpedoes. Fire when ready, Ashford ordered, his voice unwavering despite the chaos outside. The Leviathan's torpedoes streaked toward the alien command ship, bright streaks of energy cutting through space. The alien ship attempted evasive maneuvers, but it was too slow, too large. The torpedoes found their mark, and with a thunderous explosion, the command ship was engulfed in flames, its once pristine hull disintegrating into a cloud of debris. The remaining alien vessels hesitated, their tactical coordination thrown into chaos. Ashford saw a fleeting moment of opportunity. "Keep up the pressure," Ashford barked. "Now is our chance to push them back. Crews, lock onto their fighter groups. Juno, how's the evacuation going? We're getting as many as we can underground, but the remaining civilians are caught in the open." Juno's voice crackled through the comms. "They won't make it unless we stop the enemy ground forces." "Hold tight," Ashford said grimly. "We'll keep the air clear. Prometheus, target the ground forces. I want every heavy weapon system firing." "Acknowledged," Prometheus replied. "Weapons primed and targeting ground forces. Initiating bombardment." The Leviathan's heavy cannons came online, their power coursing through the ship's systems as it locked onto the enemy's landing craft and infantry transports. A barrage of fire rained down from the ship, vaporizing the invaders' landing craft in a series of bright violet explosions. "We've got them on the run," Cruz yelled, her eyes fixed on the sensor screen. "They're pulling back." Ashford allowed himself a brief breath of relief, but he knew better than to celebrate too soon. The alien fleet was vast, and this was only one battle in a much larger war. The colony was safe, for now, but the fight was far from over. "Prometheus, report," Ashford said, his voice urgent. "The enemy is retreating," Prometheus confirmed, "but they will regroup. A larger force is on its way. You have approximately 20 minutes before reinforcements arrive." Ashford turned to face the crew. "We don't have long. Everyone, get ready to move. We'll fight until the last." The crew stood tall, their faces set with determination. The Leviathan had won this battle, but Ashford knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens would strike back, harder, faster, and more brutal. But as long as they had the Leviathan, humanity still had a chance. The alien forces regrouped faster than Ashford had anticipated. Just as the last of their fighters withdrew from the colony's atmosphere, a new wave of ships entered the system, more massive and more numerous than before. Ashford watched the readings in silence, his jaw clenched, his mind racing. There was no time to rest. The Leviathan was still damaged, and the alien reinforcements were coming in full force. "Prometheus," Ashford said, his voice cold. "What are our odds against this new fleet?" "Unfavorable," Prometheus responded flatly. "The enemy reinforcements outnumber us 6-1. Their flagship is equipped with advanced shields and weapons far beyond our current capacity. However, we can still inflict significant damage if we prioritize key targets." Ashford didn't flinch at the eye's blunt assessment. He knew the odds. He had always known, but they were fighting for the future of humanity, and there was no choice but to give everything. "Crews, prepare the crew for evasive maneuvers," Ashford ordered, his eyes glued to the screens. "We need to keep their fire off the colony and keep moving." "Juno, how's the evacuation progressing?" "The civilians are secure underground," Juno replied, sounding relieved. "We've got everyone in shelter. But we can't hold forever if those aliens launch a ground assault. If we don't stop them here, the colony is lost." Ashford nodded, taking a moment to look out the viewport. The Leviathan was humanity's last hope, and it would be their final stand. He turned back to the crew, his resolve hardening. "We fight until the end. Everyone, get to your stations. Let's make sure humanity's last stand is remembered." The alien ships were now closing in, their massive forms blotting out the stars. Ashford could see their weapons charging, ready to unleash hell. "Prometheus, how soon until they're in firing range?" Ashford asked, his voice steady. "Enemy fleet will be in range in 60 seconds. Recommended strategy: evasive tactics to break their targeting lock and maximize damage to flagship and cruiser-class vessels. Secondary priority: enemy frigates." Cruz's hands moved quickly over the controls, triggering evasive maneuvers that sent the Leviathan veering and twisting through the incoming fire. Ashford could feel the ship groan under the strain of the maneuvers, but it held. "For now." "We've got 60 seconds, Cruz said, eyes wide with focus. "We need to make it count." Ashford's gaze never wavered from the view of the alien fleet. The Leviathan's weapon systems hummed to life, and he could hear the sharp click of weapon locks engaging. The crew was ready. "Full power to the Hellfire cannon," Ashford ordered. "We take out their flagship." Now, the ship's primary weapon charged again, the air in the control room heavy with anticipation. The Leviathan shuddered as the cannon's power reached its peak. Ashford gave the order. "Fire." The massive beam erupted from the cannon's core, brighter than 1,000 suns, tearing through the fabric of space. It shot toward the alien flagship, which was already in its sights, and in an instant, the ship was obliterated. The alien vessel's shields buckled under the assault, and the core detonated, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The remaining alien ships faltered. It was a devastating blow, but Ashford knew that the battle wasn't over. The Leviathan was vulnerable. Its weapons were powerful, but the ship was still fragile after the previous battles. "Captain, we've done it," Cruz said, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and triumph. "The flagship is down. They're retreating." Ashford's heart pounded in his chest, but as the alien fleet began to retreat, Ashford couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. "Don't get complacent," Ashford warned. "They'll regroup. But for now, we've won this fight." As the last of the alien ships warped out of the system, the Leviathan hung in space, battered but unbroken. The crew let out a collective breath, their bodies still tense, knowing that while they had bought humanity more time, the war was far from finished. "We've earned a moment to breathe," Ashford said, his voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "But tomorrow, we fight again." The Leviathan drifted in the void, its hull battered and scorched, but still holding strong. The crew had won a significant victory, and the alien fleet had been forced to retreat. But as Ashford stood at the helm, staring out into the vast emptiness, he knew that this was only a brief reprieve. The war was not over, and the aliens would return. But for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel something beyond the endless weight of battle. "We did it," Cruz said quietly from her station, her voice filled with relief and disbelief. "We actually did it." Ashford turned to face her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "For now. But don't get comfortable. The aliens will regroup. We've only delayed the inevitable." But there was a spark in his voice that wasn't there before. The crew had held the line. They had fought against overwhelming odds and come out on top. Humanity was still here. And that meant something. Prometheus spoke, its voice calm and measured as always. "Captain, I have completed a full analysis of the enemy fleet. The alien forces are likely to regroup in nearby systems. However, based on their tactics, they will need time to resupply and reinforce their ranks. You have a window of opportunity to strike." Ashford's gaze hardened. They had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. The enemy wasn't going to disappear just because they'd lost a few ships. It was clear that humanity's survival depended on more than just defense. It depended on taking the fight to the aliens. "Crews, prepare a course for the nearest alien fleet gathering point," Ashford ordered. "We'll need to hit them hard before they can launch a full-scale counteroffensive." Cruz nodded, her fingers already dancing over the console. "Course plotted. But Captain, We're not exactly in peak condition for another full-on engagement. The Leviathan is still heavily damaged, and we don't have much time before they regroup. We don't have the luxury of waiting. Ashford replied, his voice resolute. We fight now, while we have the advantage. If we give them time to rebuild, we'll be playing catch-up. Let's end this before they can recover. The crew moved with purpose, their movements quick but steady. There was no hesitation now. They were in this together, and every decision they made would shape the future of humanity. The Leviathan may have been the last of its kind, but the crew had made it clear that they were not going to go quietly into the night. They were going to fight until the very end. As the Leviathan prepared to jump to hyperspace, Ashford looked out the viewport one last time at the colony they had just saved. The lights in the distance glowed brightly, a beacon of life amidst the chaos. The civilians had made it to safety, but the war was far from over. This is just the beginning, Ashford muttered to himself, a fierce determination growing in his chest. Ready when you are, Captain, Cruz said, pulling him from his thoughts. Ashford nodded. Let's show them why they should fear humanity. With a final glance at the stars, the Leviathan jumped to hyperspace, its engines roaring to life as it made its way toward the next battle. The war was far from over, but humanity had proved that it was not just a dying ember in the vast darkness of space. It was a fire that refused to be snuffed out. And as long as the Leviathan sailed the stars, humanity would fight on.